Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the listening log update for December of 2018. Let's close out the year right. I had planned to do 28 albums, but I got to 21, which is a fuck ton of records. So let's do it, mate!
A few summers too long from road running, trunk full of old hunters. Of course, my old lover was scorned.
I originally filmed a guy yelling in his car about a single video for the single that Earl dropped for this record, thinking he was going to be dropping an album next year. But then the album was announced in a second single a couple days later, and that video became irrelevant. And I immediately became extremely hyped for this project, and it paid off in spades. This is without a doubt Earl's most engaging project he's ever released. And I know a lot of people were throwing out MF Doom and Quasimodo comparisons as far as influences and stuff like that, but the one artist this most reminded me of, and I mean that in not as heavy-handed of a way, but it's really there if you're looking for it, and that's my favorite rapper, and nobody seems to give him a whole lot of accolades, but it's Charles Hamilton. From the impeccable sample work to the really hazy production and even Earl's drowsy flow, which is as drowsy as it's ever been, this, by all in all, reminded me more of a Charles Hamilton project, and it helps, in fact, the lyrics are very melancholy and downtrodden, which is Earl's calling card through and through, but how Earl structured his lyrics, how loose they felt, how loose the whole album feels, it felt more in line with a Charles Hamilton project. The one big difference between this album and Charles Hamilton's projects is that this is a lot more loose with its transitions, with how it's structured. It feels more like a free-form jazz record than it does a standard hip-hop project. The first half of this album kind of flies by in an impeccable fashion. The one standout in the first half of the record is On the Way, which is my favorite cut on the record. I think Earl sounds... it's one of the tracks where Earl sounds incredibly tight, while retaining lyrics that feel as heartfelt as the rest of the project. I really think that jazzy nuance also shows its head more towards the tail end of the record, especially on the closer, Riot, which feels like this kind of echoing, forlorn, bleak siren to close out the record. A huge surprise to me as far as an album goes, and instantly became a favorite of mine for the year. I give this thing like an 8 out of 10. One of the best hip-hop records of the year, hands down, and like I said, the best project Earl has done thus far. Please, someone give Earl a hug, though. I feel like he really needs it, man. I went into this record not really knowing a whole lot about Sophie's production work, and I purely checked it out because of how much hype it had been garnering throughout the year. And I was blown away by this thing. I love the way that it sounds. I love how free-form and loose it feels. Kind of like the Earl album, only in a completely different genre. I feel like this thing really breaks down a lot of the ideas that go into electronic music and pulls them together in really key moments, like on Face Shopping and on the incredible closer, Whole New World, Pretend World. But in between those moments, there's a lot of tracks that kind of are ambient with harmonies or have loose percussive elements here and there. This feels like a very free-form electronic record. It's one that you don't really throw on as a full project in the background. It's more of an experience you kind of set aside and indulge in yourself. I think Sophie feels liberated on this project, and that makes sense given her life leading up to this project. I looked a lot into Sophie because I was fascinated by this project, and I was intrigued by her as a person after listening to this, because she seemed really capable of incredible things, and I just was blown away. And given that she became free herself, I feel like this felt more like a reflection of her mind state in the purest way, and I love this thing. As a fan of electronic music, I love how detailed and nuanced it is at breaking down a lot of the typical archetypes in electronic music and lets them sit in their own corner while another element builds or another element floats around and lets them kind of weave in and out of each other throughout the entire record's runtime. One of my favorites of the year, top 10 material for sure. I give this thing like a 9 out of 10. I don't see myself putting this thing down anytime soon. Wow.
Even smoke, but we drop tops and let it rip. Pull up if it's smoke, put them bit rock.
This is a request by my buddy Tyler, who requested the last Lil Yachty project, and he knew this thing wasn't all that well received. And boy, is it worse than Lil Boat 2. There are 3 songs that I like on this project for their own reasons. Who Want the Smoke, Worth It, and Everything Good, Everything Alright. And it's mostly the instrumentals. I like the idea of a track like Riley from the Boondocks, and I like its hook, but as a fan of the Boondocks, that song fucking sucks. I like how Worth It and Everything Good, Everything Alright rings in this more positive side of Yachty that I hear everybody talking about, and it does that side of Yachty well, and I love the instrumental of Who Want the Smoke. I love that harpsichord style instrumental, but everything else on this record fucking sucks. I hate how it's split into 2 halves, the angsty, angry Yachty side that doesn't work well for him, and the optimistic Yachty side that is just overplayed and frankly not as well put together as I have heard on other Yachty cuts. This thing sucks. A lot of the features are terrible. I think this had no real ambition, but given its title, I think it's kind of aptly named. Worst of the year contender, for damn sure. I give this thing like a 2 out of 10 for the songs that I like and the concept of a song, or the shout out to the Boondocks. Let's go on to something else. This wasn't really a request, but it was one that I had a lot of friends that really enjoyed this thing. I know John and Hannah were nuts about it, and as I had seen actually recently, Crash also is a pretty avid fan of this project, and I like it a lot. I don't love some of the parts of it. I think that there's a weird dichotomy for some of the hook writing and the soundscapes these guys work with, but Boston Manor really pull together a nice modern presentation of alternative rock. And I mean that in the sense of genuine 2000s alternative rock. Something that hasn't surfaced a whole lot in the last couple of years is present here. And while it gets cheesy on tracks like Halo, not really a big fan of that song, there is some good shit here. I love England's Dreaming. I love Digital Ghost. I love Hate You. I love the backdrop these guys are painting with. It is grim. It is dark. And while it gets catchy at points, not all the hooks are terrible. These guys write a good song. They write tight grooves. The integration of electronics when it's here doesn't feel cheesy like it does with a band like Breaking Benjamin. Like I said, this is just what I would have imagined alternative rock would have evolved into in the 2010s, say in like the year 2008. It's refreshing because I feel like this isn't really done anymore, and I hope these guys continue down this path. I know that they have some pop punk tendencies, but I feel like it's really lost on this project, and I feel like they really kind of didn't reinvent themselves, but spun their sound in a completely different funnel, and I think it paid off in spades for them. I give this thing like a 7 out of 10. Again, some of the hooks don't do anything for me, but all of the songwriting around that and a majority of the instrumental work really does a lot for me here. This was another request, one done by my buddy Austin, who's requested a handful of projects for me to tackle on this segment. And this is the latest Tim Hecker record, Konoyo, which this is kind of my introduction to Tim Hecker's music. I'm aware of who he is, but he's not an artist that I've really spent much time exploring. And I liked this project. I liked it a lot. I liked how, even with the idea of minimalism on the table, Tim keeps these sparse soundscapes interesting with touches of noise and folk-sounding instrumentation. This was one of those records that I sat down with and listened to, but kept finding myself gravitating towards wanting to leave it in the background in a good way. Like, I think this is great, at least for me, background ambience. I know this isn't going to work at your next business meeting because there are some points that get really noisy and really jarring, but I enjoy that. I like a little bit of erraticness in my backdrops if I'm not listening to lush synthetic music. I think this blends really harsh electronics with folk instrumentation really well. It gets really blissful at points, and it gets really serene in a great way, and there's a great dichotomy of serenity and a little touches of chaos. Fantastic record. Really, really good record. I give it like an 8 out of 10. It's going to sit somewhere in my top 50 of the year, but I don't think it's going to sit super high, only because this is an album that I liked. I really liked the experience that it brought me, but it's not one that I would see myself revisiting a terrible amount. I like music like this. I like ambient music. I like minimal music. I like drone music as exhibited by some of the stuff I've loved from this year, but this is one that got me into his catalog. I'm wanting to dive more into his stuff, but isn't something that I would say stuck with me as well as some of the stuff from similar avenues have this year. Still a great recommendation. Thank you, Austin. I did really enjoy this thing. This record fucking sucked. So I wasn't too kind to Wildermind, the Mumford Goes Electric record that came out a couple years back, and I wasn't really looking forward to this, but I didn't think it'd be this bland. I couldn't tell you much outside of this record that was wholly interesting outside of Darkness Visible, which after that song came on immediately made me hate every single other thing this band did on this record, because while they were writing tracks that felt incredibly Diet Kings of Leon Steel with touches of Maroon 5 now, Darkness Visible creates this pseudo-lo-fi, dense, electronic, slam-jammed, great, almost drawn-out interlude in the tail end of a bunch of shit. That is the one song that really I drew away from loving. It is the one thing that saved this from being absolutely dog shit. That Diamond in the Rough is on my Songs of the Year list, whereas the rest of this record will be lost with time. I don't know what the fuck these dudes are thinking. I don't know why they're making this really pristinely produced, pop-centric alternative rock bullshit. It doesn't sound like any record of theirs by any stretch of the imagination. Even their last record included. It's a bunch of forgetful, bland tracks that are just milquetoast. I give it like a 3 out of 10 because Darkness Visible is a genuinely good song that should have been made by a better band. Speaking of better bands, Noname Collective released arguably their most boring record this year. The Panda Bear list Tangerine Reef features the rest of the guys pulling together to make a bunch of ambient tracks using synthesizer tones that don't work well with ambient music. I know this is a part of an audio-visual experience, supposedly, but I'm a guy who listens to soundtracks all the time without watching the source material, and this didn't make me want to do anything other than shut it off. There are moments where they try to get really hypnotic and droning, only they get obnoxious because of the synth tones they use. I didn't like their previous outing for similar reasons, only that record at least had energy, it had character, it had sounds that, while annoying, were incredibly earwormy. This has just song after song of obnoxiousness. And I know they get moments like that on their older material where it works out really well in their favor because it's charming. That charm isn't present here. It's just elongated annoyingness. This album is the equivalent of a child sitting next to you, poking you in the side, asking you for some spare change on the bus because he wants a gumball and his mom won't give him a quarter. And it goes on for almost an hour. And it makes you want to fucking feed yourself to a wood chipper. Give it a 4 out of 10 because it's not the worst thing I've heard this year, but damn if it isn't the most obnoxious.
This time my best wasn't good enough. Well, fuck. Usually it is.
This was another request. The latest outing by Dessa, Chime. Now, I'm not familiar with her conglomerate or her previous outings, but I've heard that she is this really not eccentric, but really fascinating rapper. And I'm all about that, but I didn't really get that on this release. Still good, though. I think the writing is sharp, as I would have expected, given the praise I've heard her get. Tracks like Jump Rope, Velodrome, 5 out of 6, and Say When, all well-written songs, and some of those have really good blendings of pop choruses with well-written verses, but my issue with this record is it's a tale of two ideas. There's a lot on here where Dessa's really doing her best to tap into that pseudo-indie pop singer style, and that's not what I was expecting from this whatsoever. The one song that I really thought this album was going to sound more like is the interlude Shrimp. That song was really good and showcased a side of Dessa I want a lot more of, and I'm sure I'll get on her other projects. But as an introduction, I feel like this was a weird one. I feel like this is if somebody gave me Fly By Night and told me this encompassed everything Rush stands for. Which isn't completely true, even if it does have elements that are found in a handful of Rush albums. But this is still really good. I give it a 7 out of 10. I love the songwriting. I like her voice. I just think not everything matches. And the instrumentals are kind of bland on top of that, outside of a couple of tracks. Thanks, Mark, for the suggestion, though. Really good stuff. And I'll actually be looking more into this artist's catalog at some point. Yet another request in the docket. Behemoth's latest, I Loved You at Your Darkest, is a sinister, grimy, thick black metal odyssey. I like a lot of the lyrics here. I like a lot of the soundscapes here. I think it gets a little tongue-in-cheeky, but it reminds me a lot of Ghost. In a good way. I've never really listened to these guys. Again, they're one of those names I've heard thrown around a lot, like Tim Hecker, and this is my introduction to them. I've heard their last record is like one of the best of the decade, and I should give that a spin, because I really enjoyed this. I loved how tight this thing is. I loved the imagery these guys are painting with, and I like the backdrop in which they present this dark imagery that, again, gets a little tongue-in-cheek at points, like on God Equals Dog, which is a song I know other people have talked about. I don't think it's the best metal record I've heard this year. I've definitely heard more dense and more sinister and more grim, but I like it more than the newest Ghost record. And I really like the new Ghost record, but this just paints a better picture with its style. Something that I really enjoyed and found myself encapsulated with every time I threw it on. Really heavy, really good, great stuff. Giving it an 8 out of 10. Probably going to be on my top 50 somewhere. But again, kind of on the lower end, not in the mid to high sector of the list. Thank you for the suggestion, Kyle. You've given me some really good releases to check out this year.
Did I know you once?
I put out a poll on Twitter asking people if I should listen to the new Kacey Musgraves record, because a lot of people are giving it accolades. And, you know, upon my first listen, I didn't think they were all that warranted. I liked it, but I thought Jesus, what the fuck is everybody hearing that I'm not hearing? And I sat with it for a while, I let it stew with me, and while I don't really like the first leg of this record, it closes pretty adamantly. I get Kacey's appeal, especially on this record, and I get why some indie publications have adored this thing, because she does infuse elements into her alternative country styles that are a little more eccentric, a little more indie pop focused at points. I think there's even kind of a retro flair on some tracks like High Horse that really remind me of 70s disco country, which I didn't think I would really want, but I really enjoy that song a lot. And I like the songwriting on tracks like Velvet Elvis. Space Cowboy has a really fucking good hook, and I do like the opening slow burn style and sound, and I think it opens the record really well. But tracks like Happy and Sad don't really do anything for me. I get that she does this kind of simplistic writing shtick, but that's a point where it's a little too simple. It's a little too uninteresting. Some of the tracks just didn't really jive with me, like Butterflies. I don't really like Butterflies too much, because it's a little too country pop. It's not a genre I'm too into, if you catch my drift. But I did find this thing really charming, and I think revisits of it brought me a more warranted appreciation of it. Not gonna be on my top 50 of the year. I liked it. I really enjoyed it. On a worse year for music, this would probably end up on the low end of my top 50. But goddamn, did I hear a lot of really good shit this year. I give it like a 7 out of 10. Thank you guys for pushing me to check it out. I know country's not really a shtick that I typically roll with, but I don't hate the genre. I got some favorites in it. This is a really good one. I enjoyed this a lot. The next album I checked out was another request, the newest Skyharbor album, Sunshine Dust. I don't know anything about these guys, but I put them on the essentials to get to list because they were a band that I had never heard of. A lot of the bands that had been requested by you, Random Rock and Road Reviews, I had heard of, I had little interest in because of who they were. Even though the genres for this aren't really anything I have any interest in, I checked it out, and yeah, I didn't really like it that much. It's a lot of stuff that I'm not much of a fan of anymore. I don't really like airy, atypical, atonal, progressive metal with that really tired, gent touch. I don't think a lot of these songs really do anything interesting to keep themselves going forward. I think the guitar work and band playing is competent, but it's nothing that I'd write home about. This is an album that it represents a lot that I am tired of hearing in music, and I wish would become less of a fad in progressive metal. I think it's fine. I think it is what it is. I give it a 4 out of 10. It's not something I'd ever revisit in my spare time. It's just it's a subgenre within music and a section of progressive metal that I'm not a fan of. I love progressive metal, and I don't mind gent if it's done interestingly, and this did neither of those things for me. Sorry, pal. But thank you for the request and all the requests you gave me. And there's some really good shit you showed me throughout the year, so I appreciate that. But this was just one that did nothing for me. There's another request, knocking them out. Beam, bam, bam, bom, bop. By my buddy CJ, and that is the latest Palm record, Rock Island. And this is a math rock band. He said that it's if the Beach Boys were a math rock band, and that's kind of apt. You know, they're very Beach Boys, Animal Collective influenced, and in a good way. I fucking love this thing. I love a lot of the guitar passages. I love the usage of steel drums sounding percussion in some of the cuts. I love the atmosphere this thing sets, and I think it's a really nice record. There's always at least one really good math rock record that sneaks into my of the year list. And while this isn't the typical style of math rock, this is really fucking cool. I love the synthesizer work that's in here. I love the harmony work because it is very Beach Boys inspired, but like you wouldn't normally expect that in a math rock album, and yet this does it really well, and it sounds really cool. It almost feels like what the last, not Tangerine Reef, but Painting With should have been, because Painting With really laid heavy on the harmony work, and the Beach Boys influence was a little heavier on that one than Tangerine Reef, especially. And this is really fucking cool. If you want like a really not bold, but a really different style of math rock record, you can't really go wrong with this. It's paced really well. The performances on here are really tight, and the nuance that they add, the personality that they have that sets them apart from other math rock bands, is in heavy doses, and it's fucking cool. It's charming. A lot of the songwriting is charming. It's a fun release. It's a really fun record. I give this thing like an 8 out of 10. Not a good winter record if you ask me, but it's still really fucking nice. I did it. Listen to the new 1975 record, and it is different, but it's not any better. I can respect the songwriting on here. I do like the songwriting on here more than on moments from their previous outing. Outside of some of the more cringy tracks like Two Time, I feel like it is a tighter experience, but my issues are what they swapped the sporadic sounds with. I mean, they do get a little sporadic on here still, but they try to make it a little more focused. I like a handful of the first half of the record. I like Give Yourself a Try, How to Draw a Petrichor, and If America, I Like America and America Likes Me, but there are some instances on here that are just laughably bad. Like The Man Who Married a Robot, it's just Fitter Happier, but with Siri. It's just, they're trying, and it's not just on this, but there's parts where they're trying to do more of an OKC approach, which is fine, and the lyrical themes kind of tie themselves to like an OKC style record, which is fine. I'm not saying Radiohead is the only band that can do OKC, but the 1975 under band that can pull off OKC well, because they try to inject some of those really synthetic pop tones into that style of songwriting. And while Radiohead has hooks on OKC, it's a different kind than what the 1975 do. And just both styles don't mash. I do like the songwriting because it is trying to be more ambitious, cohesive, and all that sort of stuff. But this is not working on all cylinders for me. Again, the songs I mentioned, really good. But a handful of it is either really forgettable or just not all that enthralling for me. I give it a 6 out of 10 because, hey, it's as good as the last album, but it's not any better. This is the last request I had gotten for 2018. It is the debut album from Reprisal, None Survived the Sun. And these guys are a thrashy death metal band in the same vein as early thrash. They remind me a lot of Sepultura in like a really good way. I love the soundscape these guys are working with. It's very thick and raw, and their guitars are very just meaty, and their drums pack a really nice punch. I will say, while I did really enjoy the sounds in this thing, I don't think I walked away with a whole lot of memories with it. Like, I didn't think it was all that memorable. I didn't think it hooked me like some metal albums did this year. It's a really good release, and it's really tight. It's tightly put together, and these guys can pen a really good song, but I'd be hard pressed to tell you a tremendous amount of depth from any of the songs themselves, outside of that they were heavy, they were pummeling, the vocalist has a really nice tonality to his voice, and these guys remind me a lot of older thrash, which I would really like to see in future releases. I think that these guys should have a place in the kind of modern pantheon of metal because they bring back a sound that isn't really done much. A lot of thrash bands don't do this type of thrash metal, and I liked to hear that brought back up again. But I don't know, maybe it's because I wasn't in the right mindset while listening to this, but it just didn't stick with me like other metal records did this year. I do want to give it a 7 out of 10 though, because I do really like the craftsmanship that went into this thing. I like what they do. I like this start. I think it's a really solid start, and I'd like to see where they build on top of it from here. Holy fuck. I checked this out after Crash's recommendation in his review of this album, and god damn, I love this thing. You know, this made me reevaluate some of my music tastes, because I didn't realize, I knew I loved industrial, I've known that, but I love how heavy, dense, thick, and cold a lot of the sounds on this record are. You know, the percussion on this thing is so pounding and droning and just hypnotic. Author and Punisher has created such a bleak, nihilistic soundscape, and it is perfect. I love so much of this thing. I love how dense it is. You know, everything is very jagged and buzzing and just muggy, with a cold, bleak shell covering it all. The lyrics are very just bold and brash, and again, very nihilistic, very, very sinister, very bleak, very just angry and hateful. And while I don't think it's healthy to live in that, man, is it fun to just channel for, you know, about 30 minutes. I love this thing's pacing. I love that it just builds more, and there's so much going on in the mix here. It's just cacophonous in the best way possible. Strong album of the year contender. Holy fuck, I give this thing like a 10 out of 10. If you like very just apocalyptic, grim music, check this out. It's really fucking good. Now these next albums I checked out for various reasons of hype. Some of the essentials that I felt like I needed to get through by the end of the year. And the first one up was Mitski's Be the Cowboy, which was Pitchfork's album of the year. And you know, it's pretty fucking good. I think that's one that kind of deserves a spot up there, you know. It's a really charming, sweet, sounding, and honest written release. Mitski really lets her emotions ring out in the best way possible. A lot of the instrumentation reminds me of kind of early St. Vincent, whereas her lyric sheet reads less like that, and it feels a little more, not to say that Annie isn't an honest songwriter, but I feel like this feels a little more personal. It's less theatrical, and I really love this thing. I love the guitar work. I love the mix on this thing. I think it sounds very classic in like a really charming kind of way. A lot of the melodies and the catchier moments are very earwormy, and I think that the songwriting is a testament to that. I think that the good songwriting enhances a lot of these catchy moments. I think that it's just a nice, brief, you know, charming, fun art pop record with an indie twist. I give it like a 9 out of 10. Again, So many songs on here, really, really good, really, really catchy, and really just nice. I loved Old Friend. Lonesome Love is really good. Another great highlight is the closer, Two Slow Dancers. I think that it closes it out really, really well, and it sets a really good punctuation to the record that preceded it.
Tatted from head to shoulder, I'm colder when he don't hold me. I'm warmer inside the casket, basket atop my head.
I had seen so many people praising Noname for this project, and it's, again, worth all of the hype, absolutely. For being her first full-length record, no mixtape, EP, this is her first actual full-length record. It's amazing. The instrumentals on here are so smooth, and her collaborators' deliveries are all very creamy and silky and just all-encompassing. I was entranced with this record. I love the sound of it. I love her lyrics. The writing on this thing is poignant, it's sharp, it's got some wit in there, and it's super conscious. For those who don't know who Noname is, she's a rapper, and she is a fucking great rapper. For this being her debut album, you would think she's been rapping for years. She doesn't sound like she's trying to get her footing in any capacity. I mean, the album breezes by in a tight fucking 30-minute package. The subject matter she covers is very diverse and widespread, and it doesn't get preachy in any capacity. She talks about, blaxploitation. In blaxploitation, she talks about her perspective in the world. She talks about politics. She does that kind of conscious shit, but she's like Open Mike Eagle in the way that she's very smooth about it. She's very chill. And there's energy on here, but it's not Killer Mike, and it's good. I am enamored with how great this fucking record is. 9 out of 10, another 9 out of 10. My only complaint is I wish it were longer. I want more from Noname. I want to hear a follow-up already. This does what an EP normally does for me, and where it tides me over, but it really makes me want more, because there is such a consistent quality in this album that is unprecedented. I went from jazz rap to regular jazz. The next record I checked out was the newest Sons of Kemet record, Your Queen is a Reptile, and Jesus Christ, this record is fucking cool. You guys may know, may not know, I like jazz. Pretty avid jazz fan, and I love what this record is trying to do. I love what this record does. It doesn't try to do anything. It succeeds in what it wants to do. It is a celebration of black excellence, which has happened a lot this year. This year, I would say that as far as celebrating black excellence, this record has a lot of that in a lot of art mediums in the best way possible. And this record, every track named after a powerful black woman. Most of it is instrumental, a lot of it is instrumental, but what lyrics are here in the slam style, in the really smooth way that it's done, is sharp, well written, and the instrumental stuff is all really well orchestrated, whether it's really driving, like on Harriet Tubman, or on really smooth and lax, like on Nanny of the Maroons. This has a gauntlet that it runs in a small way. There's a lot of different nuances being played with, a lot of different avenues it wants to travel down, but in the slickest, sleekest, coolest way. Probably the best jazz record I've listened to all year, and it is just awesome. I fucking love this thing. I love how classic it sounds. I love how tight these guys are. And it's a dope record. If you haven't listened to it, if you like jazz, and you haven't listened to Sons of Kemet, you're fucking up, son. I give this thing like an 8 out of 10. It's going to have a place on my top 50. I'm not 100% sure where yet, but you'll know when I drop that list.
Goodbye, Mother Earth.
Man, remember when Tenacious D were funny? Because they aren't funny on here. I like Tenacious D. I love Jack Black. You guys probably know that. Well, I didn't love Rise of the Phoenix. It had good songs on it. The only credit I can give Post-Apocalypto is the guitar playing is good, but they're trying to go with this story, and the story is a mess. It feels like a third grader wrote it, because there's like, it's the apocalypse, and the world is desolate, and then there's some hot cave babes, and then there's some scientists, and we fucking hate Yo-Yo Ma for some reason. And that's like, that's just the first leg of the record. It goes that to that to that to that to that, and it's a lot. There's a lot here. There's other shit. There's Robot. There's a lot of skits on here. I feel like this is more skit heavy than your typical Tenacious D record. Like, yeah, the first album had skits. Yeah, the Pick of Destiny had like interludes from the movie, but this just felt like too much, and it felt like there was a really bad balance of funny songwriting and good instrumentation. Yes, Tenacious D aren't the highest brow comedy, but they at least write funnier shit than this. I give this a 4 out of 10. Really bad. Really, really bad. But, again, not the worst thing I've heard this year. It's just criminally unfunny. We have been teased and toyed with a new System of a Down record for years. Well, the last couple of years, really. And we thought we were finally going to get it. When, nope. Nope. It's actually just Scars on Broadway with Darren. And unless I'm wrong, unless I read this wrong, some of the songs here, at least, were supposed to be for the new System record. And you can't really tell. This feels more like a follow-up to the first Scars on Broadway than it does Hypnotize. There are some guitar tones, like on Fucking Kill, that kind of remind me of some of the Darren-focused tracks from Hypnotize, but this more or less feels like a Scars on Broadway album, which is fine, but a lot of the instrumentation just isn't as dynamic as the System of a Down record. It's passable, it's serviceable, the lyrics very political, as you can tell by the cover. It's super political, it's got a message to say, and that's fine. Darren is good, he's a capable singer, he's a great guitar player, but it just feels like one slice of a big thing, and it doesn't help that some of the guitar tones and some of the instrument, some of the sounds feel like they're indebted to System of a Down in their own way. You know, this isn't like a perfect circle where it's a couple of guys' projects, and one of them happens to be in one of the biggest bands that hasn't put out an album in a long time. And it helps that they went in a completely different direction than on their previous records. But this just feels like more Scars on Broadway, and that's something that I'm not terribly into at the moment. I'd rather have more System of a Down, which I know some of them are working on it. Sarah just keeps shooting them down, and that fucking sucks. But this, I give a 6 out of 10, because I do like some of the sharp political lyrics. They're still there. You know, there's some tongue-in-cheek shit still there from the last Scars on Broadway. Just not wholly my steez, because it reminds me of something that I like a lot more. I checked this, because people were giving it hype. People were giving it praise. Anthony loves this thing. And it's, again, worth all the praise. I didn't know what to expect when I went into this record, and I definitely wasn't expecting, like, a mini genre gauntlet. This thing is fucking cool. Like, it is awesome. There's a lot of different things going on here. There's some really poppy shit, some really catchy shit. There's some spoken word poems on here. There's some, like, happy trip hop. That's the best way to put it. And there's some disco cuts on here. There's a lot that this artist is going with here, and it works. It all works really, really well. I love how catchy this thing is. I love that even amongst this entire genre gauntlet, it doesn't feel sporadic. They keep it tight, and they keep it under a nice umbrella to make it feel like a collective project, which is a really hard thing to do. I think that it's an essential part of 2018. Some of the lyrics are very indebted to what a lot of the stuff is going on in this year. I love a lot of the hooks on like Pearly Gates and Rosebud. They're some of the catchiest shit I've heard all year, and some of the best constructed catchy music I've heard all year. I mean, holy shit. This album is immaculate in its construction, and I like this thing a lot. I give it like an 8 out of 10. It's really fucking nice, really fucking tight.
Hope you're saving data, we labor the craft and create for you. With clips of vowel scripts of power.
Last that record I checked out this year was one I didn't even realize I wanted until I heard who was on it. Hermit and the Recluse is Ka, a rapper I've been wanting a new record from since I listened to Honor Kill the Samurai in 2016. Instead of rapping about samurais and Wu-Tang inspired stuff, he's rapping about Greek philosophers, which is really fucking cool. This album is a concept where Ka writes from the perspective of the Greek philosopher, and it lets him expand his already conscious sort of delivery into a bigger plane of existence. This is the best expansion Ka could have had. I love the atmosphere of this thing. I love that it keeps the very minimal sounds from Honor Killed the Samurai, but it puts it in a Greek theater. It makes it a grand experience, even if it's somewhat minimal in its instrumental construction. There's guitars, there's strings, there's all that sort of stuff, but it feels sparse still, which is, I feel like, a really hard balance to strike. The engineer is the Recluse. He is the one that put together these instrumentals, and I feel like it's a great backdrop for Ka to rap on this philosophy. His delivery is still really cold and not menacing, but it's just very cold and stoic. And it sounds like what a Greek philosopher would sound like if they were a rapper. I mean, I'm wholly impressed with this thing. I love that he's really getting into character on here, and I love that it's just fucking dope, dude. There's a lot in here that just works, and as a fan of Ka, I'm happy to see him do more interesting things with the genre. It's a tight package, it's a short package. It breezes through its runtime really well, but it's good. It's conscious in ways that some conscious rappers don't really get to, and I like it for that. I give it an 8 out of 10. Another record that's going to end up on my end of the year list, and it's fucking good, dude. It's just, it's good. It's what I was wanting from Ka, and I'm glad that he delivered on a follow-up that is as good as his last record. And that's my 2018. It's my listening log. I want to thank everybody who's watched this segment throughout the year, who suggested records. Even if I didn't like all of the records that you suggested, I appreciate the effort put in. I got 149 albums under my belt this year, which is more than I've ever done for this segment when I was just doing it on a blog, and that's partly in help to you guys, and that's partly in help to just my growing interest in new music, but I'm hoping for just as a successful 2019. Hopefully you guys join me for the ride, but I'm gonna go. I've been Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you in 2019.